entertainment and royal correspondent at The Telegraph, India McTaggart, and journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth. Really great to have your company this Saturday. Let's kick off then with the front page of The Guardian, a big story across many of them, Benjamin, recognising Palestine as a state and the pressure building on Sir Keir Starmer, many of his MPs signing that cross-party letter demanding that action.
Yeah, so this comes on the back of France's President Emmanuel Macron formally recognising Palestinian statehood and a conference between the German Chancellor, French Presidents and Keir Starmer. And there's a lot of pressure on him, not just because of France's move, but because 221 MPs, 130 of them Labour MPs from 9 parties in total, have signed this letter calling for it. And The Guardian is saying that Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, is increasingly pushing this to be the case, but also Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, and David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, is said to be putting pressure on too. Now, one of the difficulties with this is that while there's a lot of pressure coming from within the Labour Party, there is a question about what would it actually mean, for example. So the concerns about famine in Gaza are extremely valid and pressing, but what would a Palestinian state being recognised actually do to solve the question in front of them? But also there's questions about, what would a Palestinian state look like? What would its legitimacy be? I mean, bearing in mind that Gaza is run by Hamas, which has said that it wants to attack Israel at any opportunity, that it believes in the genocide of the Jewish people. That's the explicit goal of the people that run that part of Palestine. And so I think that while there's a lot of political pressure, the actual practicalities and the security, and then there's the other element, which is the US, because when Donald Trump was asked on his flight to the UK, what do you think of Macron recognising a Palestine state? Well, he said, well, good news, I don't care what President Macron says. So would it really be a healthy move if it doesn't actually achieve anything with the relationship with Donald Trump, especially while he's in the country?
Yeah, practical terms before that happens are uncertain, that's for sure. But Sir Keir Starmer, meanwhile, faced the pressure from his own MPs, backbenchers. But he has done this op-ed, hasn't he, in the Mirror, where he said, look, we want it to be the case. We want a Palestinian state to be recognised, but it has to come at the right time. All the while, the backdrop, and this is one of those stark images on the front page of the Daily Mirror, India, urging people, I suppose, don't look away.
Yes, this is, of course, a horrific image, and it's one of many that have come out of Gaza recently. And of course, as you just mentioned, we've got Keir Starmer facing the mounting pressure, but he has insisted he will do it. It is just wanting to be at the right moment for the region, that he will recognise it at the right moment. And of course, we've got the UN conference in September with the UN General Assembly, which is when Macron is going to officially recognise it as a state. So. But separate to that, we have got the pressing image and the humanitarian crisis that is ongoing now, which is, of course, also why the mounting pressure is happening as well, because we've got these horrific images coming out of Gaza. This is Yazen Abu Ful. He's 2 years old, and he's one of apparently 122 people who have died just because of famine, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, which, of course, we have to clarify. Medics are now warning that up to 70,000 children are at risk and facing malnutrition amid the ongoing war. And I mean, these images are stark and they're difficult to look at, and I think it's going to force, more action. But as Benjamin said, what exactly will recognising Palestine as a state?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Keir Starmer said there will be a recognition from the UK. But what he said in the meantime, I thought was quite interesting, Benjamin. He said that he's considering bringing Palestinian children to the UK who need specialist help. He's considered agreeing to airdrops, which the IDF also yesterday afternoon confirmed that they would allow foreign airdrops into Gaza. And then, of course, recognition of a Palestinian state, but that has to come with a path to peace, with a path to a ceasefire on both sides. Have very little wriggle room, don't they, in what they're willing to accept at this stage. All the while, the backdrop is there's starving children, there's aid potentially metres away that they don't have access to. And then on top of that, there are hostages still inside Gaza that will also be feeling the effects of the lack of food.
Exactly. I mean, you know, bringing children to the UK, we have a proud history of that. If you look at Malala, who was shot by the Taliban in Pakistan, and I think it would seem like the right thing morally for us to do, and something that we've done in other atrocities before. But the question about the what's going on in Israel, I mean, Palestinian statehood isn't something that's going to be possible in the time frame that we should be dealing with the famine and the barbarism that is going on both sides in Gaza. But what it could do is force the hand of the Israeli government, which has basically been reluctant to listen to any pressure from allies, let alone those around the world. And maybe Macron's move, there's a commentary in the Times that says this is something that actually the Israeli government can't ignore. So is this actually a strategy to try and rein some of Israel's behaviours in? But there's also worth saying that, of course, we might discuss it in the later hours, but the British hostage that was held in Gaza has described how they had 6 people in a cage of 2 metres wide. And so people should be under no illusions about what giving power to an organisation, further power to an organisation like Hamas would do. It would not be a resolution of ending barbarism and ending the abuse of Palestinians, or for that matter, Israelis. And so there shouldn't be a naivety about that. But I would note that in the moving parts of this, the Jewish News, which is a Manchester-based Jewish newspaper, has done a very powerful editorial about why they think Israel's gone too far and why the starving of children has to end, and why that they want Jewish voices to speak up. Not, you know, Hamas is starving some of its people, it's blocked some of the food aid. The people at the top of Hamas have had rather a lot of food while the people haven't, so that's true. But the Jewish News makes the point that we can't just keep saying that. We have to speak up, in, as they put it, with our Jewish moral values about what's going on.
Also, let's not forget there's growing condemnation within Israel of the war.
Of course, we've seen protests in Tel Aviv.
Exactly.
Weekend after weekend, and there are voices that are concerned.
I was actually a couple of weeks ago, and I mean, some of the hostage families are the most vocal, because the whole point of it was it's the strategy to get hostages back. Now, you know, if they did want this to happen, not taking hostages would have stopped it happening. But clearly, there's lots of innocent people being treated in an abhorrent way, and there are still 50 hostages there. So it's
believed to be livestock.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, sorry, worth mentioning as well, just to finish off, that Israel have just announced last night that they will allow foreign countries to drop aid again. That was
broken on Sky News.
Yes.
Earlier we had Peter Carley, Science Secretary, who we were speaking to at breakfast yesterday, who actually had a differing view on that as a former aid worker, and the implications that can actually have on people in small areas gathering, trying to rush for aid. And then if you look at this front page of the Daily Mirror, you know, don't look away. Once the aid gets into Gaza, and many people are hoping it happens soon, it won't have an immediate effect on a 2-year-old whose organs are shutting down, who is barely able to walk. And these are the images, these are the conversations that when we look back in history, on what side was our government, on what side was the world in terms of helping innocent people. So it's a story that we'll continue to have here on Sky News. Shall we move on to the Times? Another big story here on Sky News has been Donald Trump's holiday with some business on the side in Scotland, and he's touched down yesterday evening, and he had a message. You touched on this, Benjamin. He had a message, didn't he, for European leaders, in particular Emmanuel Macron, warning that migration is killing Europe. And that headline, indeed, migration is killing you. He's calling for Europe to do something about the problem of immigration. Yes,
characteristically, Donald Trump is quiet and diplomatic on a foreign visit. So he said that immigration is killing Europe, as you say, and then he said there are some leaders that have done a good job on this, but I don't want to call them out because it will embarrass the ones who aren't. He didn't go further than that. But, you know, clearly back in the US, he has a very hard line, in some cases seemingly illegal attitudes, illegal and sometimes legal migrants, and he feels that he says Europe will lose its identity if it doesn't deal with this. Now, he's due in Scotland at his golf course, which he arrived at.
He's opening another one too, so there's a lot of, you know, benefactors in Scotland from Donald Trump, and I think from our reporter Con Gillis, there's quite a mixed opinion on him being there and the benefit that he brings.
The protests.
But he's meeting with Sir Keir Starmer and the EU President Ursula von der Leyen. I don't know if that's my idea of a holiday, but that's what he's doing while he's here. So you wonder if these could be raised. You can imagine the question of Palestinian statehood could be one that's raised during that discussion, given how pertinent it is in these days. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that and whether that affects our own government's perception of it.
I mean, immigration's been dominating the news agenda pretty much all week because of the Bell Hotel in Epping, and we have a risk of further protesters clashing and counter-protesters clashing this weekend there. I actually read a really interesting write-up by Robert Hardman in the Mail before this morning. It's in the Mail today, and he was actually talking about how most of the protesters that are against the single male migrants staying in the Bell Hotel in Epping, or indeed in other hotels in local areas, are predominantly women who are really concerned about the safety of their children. And of course, this comes off the back of the alleged sexual assault of the local girl there. And of course, you know, as a parent, that would be a terrifying perfect. You don't want to see that directly, as your neighbour, and you don't want that fear. And so he was just saying it's come out that it's not only an issue now that's easily sort of branded as, oh, this is just discourse online from far right people, that's being stoking hatred and xenophobia. This is a real thing, and a real issue.
We'll have to leave it there for now. India and Benjamin, thanks so much for your company. More in the coming hours of The Breakfast Show. But let's touch in on the weather this Saturday.